I wanted to share this clip with you because it's just fucking solid. And you know what? Any excuse to like just crowbar Sir Ian McClellan into just about anything I do, I will take at a heartbeat. So here you go. Here he is. He's on the Colbert Show giving a monologue from Shakespeare's play Sir Thomas More, which a lot of folks apparently don't know, but here he is doing just an excellent job. And I think a lot of you might this monologue might take on some new meaning.
Grant them removed, and grant that this your noise hath chid down all the majesty of England. Imagine that you see the wretched strangers, their babies at their backs, with their poor luggage, plodding to the ports and coasts for transportation. And that you sit as kings in your desires, authority quite silenced by your brawl, and you in ruff of your opinions clothed. What had you got? I'll tell you. You had taught how insolence and strong hand should prevail, how order should be quelled. And by this pattern not one of you should live an aged man, for other ruffians, as their fancies wrought, with self-same hand, self-reason, and self-right, would shark on you, and men like ravenous fishes feed on one another. You'll put down strangers, kill them, cut their throats, possess their houses. Oh, desperate as you are, wash your foul minds with tears. And those same hands that you, like rebels, lift against the peace, lift up for peace. And your unreverent knees, make them your feet to kneel to be forgiven. And say now the king, as he is clement, if the offender mourn, should so much come too short of your great trespasses, but to banish you. Whither would you go? What country, by the nature of your error, should give you harbour? Go you to France, or Flanders, to any German province, Spain or Portugal, nay, anywhere that not adheres to England? Why? You must needs be strangers. Would you be pleased to find a nation of such barbarous temper that breaking out in hideous violence would not afford you an abode on earth? Whet their detested knives against your throats, spurn you like dogs, and like as if that God owned not, nor made not you, nor that the elements were not all appropriate to your comforts, but chartered unto them. What would you think to be thus used? This is the stranger's case, and this your mountainish inhumanity. William Shakespeare, 400 years ago.
So, you know, just getting a little bit cultured there. Yeah, authorship of Sir Thomas More is in fact hotly debated. There is like a 3-page manuscript allegedly from Shakespeare. That's a whole can of worms I'm not getting into right now. But I think, again, if you guys aren't into Shakespeare, there's a lot to like in Shakespeare. Use this as like an excuse to get into these types of plays, because it wasn't just Shakespeare writing plays at the time, guys. Like, there were a lot of plays being written during that era, a lot of them very good. Shakespeare, through a variety of factors, notably, again, his involvement with the British Crown, got canonized effectively into literature, but a lot of other playwrights were doing incredible work. A lot of them dealt with the same issues we deal with today. You know? A lot of them dealt with all like the same loves and joys. You know, we're gussied up a little bit with technology for sure, but You know, like Shakespeare, yeah, Shakespeare understood mad kings. Yeah. I mean, you kind of would have to. You would have to understand the mindset of like a petty tyrant when you live in a world governed by petty tyrants in the form of aristocracy, right? And also, yes, the plays back then, very horny. Very, very horny. Um, a lot of folks tend to attribute like a lot of not horniness to like Elizabethan theater or Shakespearean theater. And it's just very, very horny. They were playing to the cheap seats, and that is one of the reasons those plays are so timeless. That's really disheartening. Like, we literally will never win, and the rich will always win. Well, counterpoint: we overthrew kings. It does not have to be that the kings will always dictate our lives. It does not have to be that the rich and the powerful will always be wielding so much influence over our lives. It does not have to be that way. I would say less than it's disheartening. I would say more that it is. I would say more that it is our inheritance. We inherit a great struggle. We inherit a battle that has taken place long before we were born and will continue long after we die, but we will do our bit to move it forward and to make things better for our children and our children's children. It is, a struggle that is not impossible for us to win. And the long arc of human history and every advance that we have made towards egalitarianism, towards equality, that is a blow against this mindset of the tyrant. And it could be that we will fail. And it could be that our children and our children's children will be doomed to try and pick up the pieces. But we'll have to try. That is one of the inevitable things we all come into when we become adults and become aware of how the world works. And so I would just put forward that there are people in this world who have struggled against the might of entire empires armed with nothing but sticks and rusted weapons, and they have emerged victorious. And when we look towards one another, we are armed with far more than that. And we have much better organizing apparatuses available to us. And so all that remains for us to do is to organize and follow in the footsteps of those who blaze the trail before us. Yeah, never forget our enemies are water-headed fail sons who are only where they are because of daddy's investment portfolio. 10,000%. 10,000%. I've been thinking a lot, especially with the Epstein files out, but I've been thinking about the fact that, like, at the heart of Glass Onion is that the people themselves are transparent, and that the entire system is laid bare, and the entire way in which these networks of power are obvious, right? And it is not made apparent to a lot of people because there are a lot of distractions that get thrown up. There are a lot of different ideas of how power works, of why people are associated with one another. And the reality is, at the end of the day, it's just the power. The system of capitalism is a system to distribute power, right? And so people become dependent on those who have power, i.e., have capital, have wealth, and like, what ends up happening is that in order to cover up the fact that they are completely and utterly without merit, that they just happen to be in the position that they are in, by and large, they create a mystique around themselves. They create an idea of themselves that they project to the public. Whether it's I'm a free speech warrior or something like that. And I guess like, I've been thinking about that message and thinking about the Epstein files, and it's exactly that. It is exactly what Marx wrote about. I read the quote the other day about how essentially if you have money, if you have capital, if you possess these things, people attribute to you all things that money can buy. They attribute to you, knowledge, they attribute to you expertise, they attribute to you um, any number of reasons that they can imagine as to why you possess power, but they do not, right? And the simple reality of it is because the system distributes funds in a way that does not reflect merit. It does not do that. The people around Epstein weren't necessarily the smartest people. They weren't necessarily the best people. They were the most dedicated to obtaining a portion of his power that he himself had accumulated through no real reason whatsoever, through whim and chance, and perhaps the whim of some kind of I don't know, like some kind of tin pot despot in the Middle East. Who can say? What was it Blanc said? It's all just so stupid. I mean, yeah, right? Like, and when you examine how capital works, it is all just stupid. If you already have a bunch of it, it's basically impossible to lose the game. If you have enough capital, it simply continues to accumulate. You don't even have to do anything with it. An idiot with a gun is the most terrifying thing. Yeah, and effectively we've just given idiots with guns billions of dollars with which to hire millions of guns, you know? And so I've just been thinking a lot about this. And I've come to the conclusion that capitalism is bad, and maybe we should embrace a different, better system. I don't know. I think we need to start the process of shrugging off the yoke of this Habsburgian inbred system that is dedicated to the accumulation of wealth at all costs. I think it's bad, actually. Capitalism bad? Yeah, I know, an incredible revelation for a socialist to have. But it is just quite something, isn't it? It is just quite something to have a trove of documents explicitly laying out these talentless losers who can barely write words, let alone sentences. And they are like the most influential and powerful individuals on the planet. That's pretty interesting, isn't it? It really just hammers home that this entire system is just stupid and rotten, and we could do a damn sight better than it. There are other systems. There are indeed. Capitalism is far from the only system. There were systems prior to capitalism. Those systems were, feudalism. That wasn't very, very good either. And Marx even acknowledges that capitalism is an improvement on feudalism. But there are further improvements that can be made. It's why he wrote out his entire examination of capital. It's why he bothered to write all of these observations down and note how the system functions. It's because he believed that if we understood the current system we're in, that we all work and die under every day, that perhaps we could figure out some ways to improve it somewhat, Perhaps a bit of hubris on his part, but you know what? He kind of nailed it. So he really owned up to his goal there. The other systems, by the way, are possible. Just as feudalism was possible, just as capitalism was possible, so is socialism possible. Anyway, I wanted to say that. I don't know if that was useful, but I if you haven't watched it, watch Glass Onion and make note of how these people kowtow to power in order to benefit themselves by just sucking on its teat. and then think about how Jeffrey Epstein and every single powerful man or billionaire, trillionaire, whatever you've ever heard of escapes any kind of accountability because of how wealthy they are and the desperate people they surround themselves with. It is an indictment against the entire system that these people are allowed to prevail. Well, that's the problem, more Ron, please. Like, the problem with capitalism is its extreme flexibility. What capitalists discovered with its flexibility was that on a long enough timeline, they can accumulate enough power to effectively break whatever political system capitalism exists in. And once they've done that, they can continue to break it until, well, you get to a point of complete and utter self-destruction, fascism, if you will. And so the argument I have is that, of course, it is possible to place constraints on capitalism, but what is impossible to do is to place constraints on capitalism that capital will not, given time, undo. Because when you look back at the attempt to constrain capital over the last century, what you find is, in fact, a slow but steady erosion of all of the locks and keys and barriers placed on capital by the New Deal. What you find is a long and concerted effort to undo the entire fair shake that the New Deal was supposed to give working people in this country. And you even see it now. Like, the billionaires are trying to build network states, i.e. company towns. They just think that this time they will get it right. This time they will be the dictator that will have it all done. And you look at Peter Thiel giving speeches. He's talking about, like, becoming a fascist. He's talking about becoming a dictator. And he is allowed to do this and allowed to continue to accumulate power as if he's just a normal guy with no ulterior motives, while he continues to fund efforts to undermine democracy. And so my argument here is that any of the constraints we put on capital are temporary. Here's some not socialism for you. Thank you, Ronan Jack. Appreciate the $2 super chat. And so, like, I just think the main issue with capitalism is that it inevitably bends towards this. Because when you concentrate power in the hands of a few people, you're effectively playing Russian roulette to see which one of them is going to try to imagine themselves as a benevolent dictator. Which one of them is going to look at the current state of things in a democracy and say, if I ran everything, the sheep would be better cared for. The sheep can't rule themselves. I will be their shepherd. And, like, that's the issue, right? That's the fucking issue. The authoritarianism is baked into that accumulation of wealth. That's socialism by definition. No, socialism by definition is democracy. Socialism by definition is a belief, an unshakable belief in democracy, right? Capitalism is antithetical to that. If you believe in democracy and the ability of a people to govern itself justly and with equality, then you should believe in the ability of workers to govern themselves justly and with equality. Socialism only works in theory. I beg you to look into democratic worker co-ops. There's a sizable amount of research that indicates democratic worker co-ops are more financially stable. They survive harsh economic conditions better. The workers are paid better. The workers are happier. And also, they are less likely to offshore jobs. They are less likely to commit tax fraud. They are more likely to be held accountable. And so, put simply, I don't like tyranny. I don't like authoritarianism in any form. And the idea to me that a nation founded on the idea of democracy, on one person, one vote, should then abdicate the realm of where every working person spends the majority of their day to a tyrant, to the boss, to a board of shareholders, of investors. What you were talking about is abdicating the realm of the worker to the tyranny of people who just happen to have money. And people who happen to have money don't know anything about the work that's being done. They're just stupid dipshits who have money. Have you ever looked at the venture capital firms that go in and fund things? The vast majority of their businesses are buying up successful businesses, loading them with debt, and then gutting them so that they can make a hefty payday bonus for themselves and then move on after that company goes bankrupt. That is capitalism right now. It is self-cannibalizing us as a nation. It exists to feed on the work that people like you or I have done. And we don't have to be content with that. Name a socialist country with a better system than the USA. Define what socialism is. Because I get this question a lot from you guys. And the issue that you guys all invariably run into is that you believe socialism is not what socialism actually is. Socialism is an economy where workers own their own workplaces. Full stop. Where if you work in a factory, you and the rest of the folks who work at that factory collectively own and operate that factory. That's it. It's just an economy that is predominantly that. But what a lot of you fine folks seem to think is that socialism is China, or socialism is the USSR, or socialism is state capitalism, in other words. And the state owning something is not socialism, actually. That's just another form of undemocratic ownership. You replace one boss for another. That's not, in fact, democratic at all. And a lot of folks keep saying, well, it's impossible. It's impossible to have a democratically owned and operated company. And I just want to point out that there are plenty of democratically owned and operated companies in the United States. Bob's Red Mill, for example. I'm sure you guys have gone through a supermarket aisle and seen Bob's Red Mill flour for sale, or they have a wide variety of different flours. I'm sure you guys have gone to a grocery store and seen King Arthur Baking. King Arthur Baking is a democratically owned and operated company. And yet you guys are like, well, it's just impossible. It's just impossible to have a company that's democratically owned and operated, except it's not. One of these companies, I think it's King Arthur Baking, as a good example. Yeah, King Arthur Baking was founded in 1790. It is, in fact, one of the oldest remaining companies in the country. And a lot of you guys are like, but it's impossible. This company has survived for over 300 years. And all I'm saying is, hey, what if we did more of that? What if instead of being told what to do when you go to work because some dipshit investor heard about NFTs and now they know that this publicly traded company will gain 5% in the stock market if they start putting out press releases about NFTs? And so they shift the entire business model of the company towards NFTs. Hey, maybe the workers who work there could decide what's best for the company because they actually work there and know what the fuck they're doing. I don't know. It's just a pretty good idea as a way that we could move towards a more free and fair society. Look, Jaeger Larson, I when people say China is in a transitional state towards socialism, I don't believe that. I don't believe that that is something that they are actually doing. When I look at what China does as a country, I don't believe that. In America, you can? Yeah. Except that what I propose is that we make it easier for people to do that. There are countless subsidies for private corporations in America, and yet democratic worker co-op businesses exist. And my proposal, as somebody who analyzes politics, is that we make it easier to make democratic worker co-ops and allow the two to compete with each other. They do already. See, my argument here is that the biggest drain on our efficiency, which is indicated, by the way, by the data, the biggest drain on our efficiency, the biggest drain on our ability to pay workers are the parasitic investment class. Full stop. Our entire economy right now is connected to whether or not ChatGPT can stop hallucinating and driving people insane while thriving entirely off of stolen work. And like, that's not going to pan out for us, just as an FYI. And maybe the shackles that bind us to this idea, which were forged by billions and billions of dollars from venture capital firms that have now tied the fate of whether or not you and I can afford things at the grocery store, maybe that's bad. Maybe that's in fact bad, and we should not have that system. You can. The only thing stopping you is your ability to walk the walk. Well, actually, I do own my own company. Just as an FYI, I am the sole employee of the company, in fact. So really, when you're saying you could walk the walk, I already am. But I will also say here that democratic worker co-ops, there you go. Yeah, exactly. But your argument really fell apart there. What you are failing to understand is that there are a number of incentives that make it easy for private companies to exist in the United States that are owned by one person or a couple people or like a board of investors, right? And there are not a lot of systems that make it easy for a democratic worker co-op to exist. What I'm proposing are changes to our economic system that allow for democratic worker co-ops to be easier to bring into a being. Now, my ideas, I know these are going to sound crazy to all of you capitalist stands out there, okay? But here are the ideas. The ideas are a democratic worker co-op is a privately owned entity. They can get the same opportunities. No, they can't. That's not how that works, actually. I can tell you this because I looked into how to make one. They are not eligible for the same kind of business credits. They are not structured the same. But here are the proposals. The proposals are thus. Hey, let's bring back postal banking. Postal banking was a system of banking we had up until the 1960s that allowed people to use their local post office as a bank, meaning that every single person in the country had the ability to use the post office as a bank, which might not sound like a huge game changer, except that there are people who are so rural, they do not have access to banking. And when we take a look at that, I think that it's an important component of how to make starting a company more attainable. And it can then become the avenue through which the government says, hey, you want to start like a democratic co-op? We're going to give you more accessible loans specifically for that type of company structure. Post office as a bank, how? They had banking services at the post office. The post office already handles like an ungodly amount of money. They are one of the only solvent branches of the US government. This just expands what they can offer at their location, right? And What you then do with that, you offer attractive loan programs for democratic worker co-ops. It makes it easier for folks to start them. Okay? It comes to loans and credits again. Well, loans are actually pretty important because it allows the government to assume risk for the democratic co-op businesses, as opposed to private lenders who are the main roadblock to making investment into democratic worker co-ops. Because part of the issue here is that private lenders do not see the kind of return that they want to see when you pitch them on the idea of democratic co-ops, because the money isn't not going to, necessarily pay off the loan as quickly as a private corporation, right? When they crunch the numbers, they see the private corporation, oh, okay, you're gonna like exploit the workers more so that you have a larger profit so that you can then pay off the loan more easily. That's kind of the what happens when they look at whether or not they want to approve a loan for a democratic worker co-op. And the entire process could be made easier by the government stepping in, assuming some of the risk for that loan, and offering slightly more attractive terms, etc. And that's important because also the government would directly benefit from investing in democratic co-ops. And the reason I say that is because, again, democratic co-ops are less likely to move their base of operations, to move their factory or whatever they're building, right? Largely because when something is owned and operated by the workers, turns out workers aren't too keen on moving and uprooting their entire family to move, 20 miles away, 100 miles away, 1,000 miles away. They aren't too keen on the idea of offshoring their own jobs and don't, in fact, vote for that. And the other part of it is that when these companies are created, we have the statistics on the survivability of these companies. Democratic worker co-ops are more likely to survive any kind of economic bumps than a private entity, right? Democratic worker co-ops are more invested in their people. So the folks who work there tend to work there for a long time. It means they attract jobs that are going to stay there. And not only that, but democratic worker co-ops are shown to be less likely to cheat on their taxes. They're less likely to drop pollution into their local rivers and lakes. The entire premise that you start operating on here is actually that these people live here and give a damn.
The democratization of all chicken businesses is crucial. Creating co-ops is no poultry concern to the workers.
But that's, I love the joke. Number one, thank you for the 2 tier 1 subs, number 2. And number 3, unironically, do you think that if workers owned and operated a meatpacking plant, right? Do you think if a Tyson meatpacking plant was owned and operated by the workers, that they would be as willing to work with machinery that's so unsafe that they could cut their hands off? Do you think that they would be moving at such a speed that they'd be in danger of losing their fingers? No, they'd slow down. They would take the slight decrease in efficacy and efficiency in order to maintain their workforce and keep people safe. Do you think that they would be willing to hire literal children and put them in harm's way? No! God, no! And if you think that, this just wouldn't happen, I encourage you to read Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, because we know, and we've known the entire time, that private meatpacking is one of the most disgusting and unsafe jobs that exists. And so, I want to just, lay all that out, right? There is a direct incentive for the US government to invest in, democratic co-ops. The government then would also reap larger tax revenue as these companies grow. They are better for the local like economy, they are better because also they pay their workers more. Democratic worker co-ops pay their workers more because the workers are collectively getting together and agreeing on how much to pay the people who do the different jobs, which means that more money then circulates in the local economy. And it also means that the people who support that business locally keep that money circulating in the local economy. That's good. Meatpacking and farming are disgusting jobs. Yeah, they are. And they would benefit from being democratically owned and operated. And so that's just like some of the incentives, right? You bring back postal banking, you put out a loans program in order to facilitate the creation of these, and you allow people to experiment with what works, right? You allow that to happen, and you start to foster these small businesses that are highly resilient with workers who are decently paid living wages, who are able to like build a life. And then my other proposal here is that you then create a system where if a private company wants to be sold to another private company, they have to first offer the company to the workers who work for them. You have to offer it a right of first refusal to the workers. Bernie Sanders wrote legislation like this. And essentially, if you want to have this corporate consolidation happen, well, first you gotta offer it to your workers. Maybe they want to band together and buy the company instead at a reasonable rate. And yes, that might be something that's very difficult, but I think if you like looked at, for example, auto manufacturers, I think maybe you'd find workers who'd be willing to pitch in and collectively buy the place that they work in. I think that if you look at these different companies that get bought and sold by venture capital all the time, you would find workers who would much rather keep their job and collectively own and operate that company. And I will also say, I think that we go a step further, and if there is a company that is so in need of a government bailout in order to continue to operate, in my mind here, I'm thinking of the airlines. I'm thinking of the banks who took out the bailout loans in 2008. How would they be able to afford it? The government would give them like a reasonable loan. Because in this case, right, what we're talking about is collectively all of the workers would assume some level of, responsibility for that loan. And the government would step in to absorb some of that risk, right? And I think it would probably be reasonable that if the workers voted in favor of doing this, that the government would have like a representative on the board in order to make sure that loan is repaid. And when that loan is repaid, then they go their separate ways as completely separate entities. Do you think worker-owned grocery stores would be a good bridge to free grocery stores? Yes. Yes, I do. Though, maybe not. I have, in my mind, when I think of free grocery stores, I just think of, free, food shelves. Like, the federal government should, in every major city, have X, if you have X population, there should be X number of, food pantries that will just straight up give you bread and eggs and milk, largely because I think that this would benefit everybody. It does not benefit us to starve people. It does not benefit us to have a population of people who are destitute and unable to make ends meet. It does not benefit you. When people complain about, LA, people are pooping on the streets, that's because there's a choice being made that says rich assholes in their mansions are more important to keep being rich than to build the proper bathroom capacity for people who are not rich, for people who are destitute. There's a decision being made there. And in fact, we don't have to choose for the rich to benefit from our public subsidies instead of the destitute. We can build infrastructure that benefits everybody. Like, it's not rocket science here. Do you have a job yourself? I'm literally doing my job. This is what I do. I am able to afford to live based on doing this program. Who hasn't walked through downtown and realized there's no bathrooms or benches in this place as far as I can walk? Exactly. Exactly. And so, and you do a damn good job. Thank you, Jennifer Smith. I appreciate that. So, the entire premise here that I put forward, and I've talked about this quite a bit in the past, but the entire premise of this postal banking as a platform to raise up local experiments with democratic co-ops, and then a system that is top-down in regards to creating larger democratic co-ops. My argument here is that you will, through putting this into existence, you effectively start a war of attrition between capital-owned companies and worker-owned companies, right?
This is how Jack makes fat stacks. We call here fat stacks Jack, because it sorta rhymes.
You absolutely do not call me Fat Stacks Jack. But thank you for the 2 tier 1 subs. Now I will also say that what you are creating here is a ground up system as well as a top down system, right? And the top-down system and the ground-up system
This is
slowly
an automated message.
crush.
You have received a salary disbursement.
Paladin Lost, thank you for the $50 dono. Very much appreciated. Thank you so much, comrade. Right, so you, by making these small changes to our system, you could effectively ingrain this
You're able
attrition
to live by doing
into
this program?
the system.
Live harder, Humera.
Live harder, Humera? Was that an ad for Humera in there? Anyway, Matt Yahoo, thank you very much for the $20 dono. Very much appreciated. So, sorry, I'm getting distracted, but you have this vice placed on capital, and you have an increasing, in my view, what I believe that this does on a long enough time scale is create a transitionary mechanism to bring us from an economic model predominantly controlled by capital to an economic model primarily controlled by working people, right? That's what I am putting forward. And of course, there are additional things on the local level that might help. There are additional things on the national level that might help. But if you had this system where companies, before they're acquired by another one in a private sale, have to offer the company to their workers, and also if they needed a government bailout because they're too big to fail, would then need to be transferred to worker ownership, then you have postal banking and government loan programs to experiment with worker co-ops, then you have effectively this mechanism to transition to democratic worker co-ops. Because what worker would ever decide to work for a capitalist when they can work for themselves and their fellow workers instead? Why would you ever work for a private owner when you know that your healthcare is dependent on their whim, on their desire for profit? And I don't believe, if given a choice between those two, that people would choose the private owner. Jack would love to talk about co-ops sometime in my trials and tribulations attempting to build them myself. Had a few runs at it, but nothing that came to fruition long term. I'm bad at commercializing and finding good co-op partners. Even made some videos on how various co-ops and structures of co-ops work. I'll have to DM those to you to be useful for Imogene Olivia. Hell yeah. I think Imogene
Oh
Olivia is
no,
going to be a bit
Fat
different.
Stacks Jack, you didn't tell me I was yellow again.
Salmon Moose, thank you for the tier 4 sub. Very much appreciated. Imogene Olivia is going to be different insofar as, like, in the immediate sense, like, it's not, it's also solo owned, but there are plans to, like, handle that in the future. It's just there's only one person working there. We've talked about it, like, we're still figuring out where it would go in the future, but makes sense. Yeah, it's again, a lot of democratic worker co-ops in a weird place regarding, like, structure and, like, how legally they get classified and etc. It's still being figured out. I don't want to, like, say something right now and say it wrong and misrepresent what it is. Becoming Tanya, thank you for the 5 gifted memberships. Very much appreciated. Hell yeah. Anarchism is the concept of democracy taken seriously. Yeah, which is why on a long enough time scale, I really fuck with anarcho-communism. But I think that the project of dismantling capital is one that is probably going to outlive me. And the project of dismantling the state is also a much longer project than probably my lifetime. So I look for what we can plausibly do to move forward in the immediate sense with where we're at, but just know my heart is with you, friendo. Some states you have to LLP or LLC, others have mutual benefit corporations. Yeah, there's also something with, like, S corps. I'm not really good at, like, business stuff, as I mean, I guess I'm the only one who's ever seen, like, the business end of what I do, but, like, I'm not super good at, like, the classifications or navigating that. The people who like the idea of any flavor of anarchy or communism would never survive the system. I mean, I don't think that any of you have a concept of what an anarchist or communist system would look like, right? Like, I don't have the hubris to say that I understand exactly how a classless, moneyless, stateless society would function. But I don't think you do either. There are many different ways a society like that could look, but I don't think the people who are like, you'd never survive, I don't think you guys understand it either. And that's important to work out before committing. Yeah, but the argument that I just put forward is that in my lifetime, it's largely irrelevant, right? Like,
Co-op workplaces are great, but I think we really need more co-op games too.
hell yeah.
Co-op games made by co-op workers.
Hell yeah. That's right. Tell the folks who made Dead Cells to get on that co-op. That sweet co-op. I will also say, yeah, like I found my train of thought again. What I'm trying to say is that I don't expect that within any of our lifetimes, the system of, the commodity form to cease to exist. I don't expect in any of our lifetimes for the concept of the state to stop existing. But that's not generally how anyone who adheres to anarcho-communism conceives of it. Like, yeah. And that's why I also just don't really... because of the common misconceptions, I don't typically call myself an anarcho-communist, even though I fuck with it. It's largely something where I'm like, I have a set of coherent policies that I can advocate for to get us to a state of socialism, a state where the workers control the means of production, which is what Marx was pushing for. Marx acknowledged that capitalism was an improvement over feudalism. Marx was just saying we can further improve capitalism by taking us by going in this direction. And I believe that. I think he kind of nailed it on that one. And so to take the next step in the direction of improving things, I think socialism makes sense. to move from a system primarily owned by capital to a system primarily owned by workers is a colossal thing. It is huge. And I will also say that it's not the end state either. In a sense, like, there will never be an end state because humans aren't like that. We aren't built for that. Things will always be changing. But I can get us to the next step. And once we're there, perhaps I can envision a further step. A step where the commodity form loses more and more of its relevance. And in a similar way, another step beyond that would be a world in which the concept of a state loses relevance. You know, this is referred to as the fading away of the state. An idea of essentially the purpose for the state ceases to be relevant. Our needs are met. Our ability to live in harmony with each other grows, and a need for arbitrary lines on a map in order to demarcate where, you know, you have certain rights and no rights on the other side of it, like, that ceases to have relevance. A fading away of borders, a fading away of the need for a commodity form, etc., etc., etc. And it could be that we run into a roadblock where we need to retain, you know, an element of one of those things. Maybe. I'm open to ideas as we continue down this path, but I can look at what's happening right now and understand that we need to change this system of capital that is concentrating wealth and power in the hands of idiots and morons. And these idiots and morons, armed as they are with the ability to buy 1 million guns apiece and arm 1 million soldiers apiece, are leading us towards annihilation. As they buy newspapers and spread lies and use their million megaphones to tell you things that are simply not true about how they actually all deserve the millions of soldiers and the millions of megaphones and the millions of accolades that they've bought for themselves. This system is broken, and they will continue to accumulate millions and millions more until they lead themselves and everyone who they have under their power to annihilation. And so I view it as a fundamental human duty to oppose that system of capital that creates these despots, to break the gears of the factory that create these would-be kings. And I hope many of you feel the same way. So, anyway, that's my piece. I have now been talking for an hour and a half. Oh my god. Well, I hope you all enjoyed that exploration of my arguments against capitalism. I don't support communism, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't agree with every policy. Muffle Moose, that's all I'm asking. I'm not asking for people to buy in to the long arc of history, because what I'm talking about when I talk about the fading away of the state, when I am talking about the fading away of the commodity form, these are projects that could take potentially hundreds of years. It's not something that I would expect to happen in my lifetime remotely. It is merely a long-term goal when I look around and see what imperialism has done, what empire has wrought, and I think, hey, maybe life would be better if the scramble for Africa hadn't happened. Maybe life would be better if, in fact, we hadn't slaughtered millions of each other because wealthy people wanted to build banana plantations and rubber plantations and gather gold and raw resources from the Americas and, you know, hoard rice from the people who are starving in Bangladesh. I just think that maybe life would be better if we didn't do these things, and would be better, in fact, and actually improved if we invested our time and effort into everyday working folk. But yeah, I don't expect the project of any of these to take a short amount of time.
Did you ask Jimmy about the communityism mandate comment?
I have no idea what you're talking about, so no. But thank you for the $10 super chat. And folks, I guess this will be a segment. If you enjoyed that, let me know what you think down in the comments. I'm always open, by the way, to new policies. If you have additional policies specifically related to transitioning to a primarily democratic co-op economy, I'd be very curious and interested to hear and read them. So leave those comments down below, and also leave a like, subscribe, do the things. And I would also say, get organized. We need more folks in DSA. We need more folks in Working Families Party. We need more folks in the Democratic Party to radicalize them to better positions. We need fewer Chuck Schumers, and we need more Mamdanis. So get your ass to the meetings, okay? And last but not least, please consider checking out ImogeneOlivia.com. Gender euphoric lingerie designed from the ground up for trans femmes, tested on cis men, cis women, non-binary folks. It's non-tucking lingerie. Check it out. It is very comfortable, very flattering, and new sizes, styles, and colors are coming in the near future. Link should be down in the doobly-doo. Let's keep on going, folks.
Riverboat Jack is coming to town. All the viewers gather round. Twitch and YouTube is where she streams. All that content is bursting the seams. Politics, gaming, and plenty more. Her sense of fashion you'll adore. So grab your stuff and hop aboard. We're going straight to Jack's Discord. Riverboat Jack,